Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Brian Cartwright with the Final Mile Corporation.
Thank you, everybody. We're here today to discuss a couple of topics that I think apply to everyone in this audience, both present here and online. One, we're here to talk about packages that come to your door. I think everyone here has a package coming to their door. But let's talk about what really happens to make that package come to your door and what we can do to help make that happen. And when we do it right, what happens? And when we do it wrong, what happens? So when we do it right, a number of things can happen to help our communities and to help all of us. We do it wrong, the packages actually cost more, there's a lot of waste. So we're going to simulate, if you will, the waste part. We're going to start. Now, what did that have to do with waste? Well, actually, the car was just something I wanted to do because I was one of those guys. Back in the 70s, we were car people actually racing cars from Detroit. I'm originally from Detroit, even though our company's from Atlanta. We're coming back to Detroit, Michigan. We'll talk about that very soon. But you know what? We also burned some money there. What are we talking about? We're actually burning money at a rate that if you actually saw it graphically, you'd want to actually do everything you could to try to reverse that trend. So at the end of the day, we're here to help reduce waste. So we've talked about racing, like racing cars out on that track. We're racing fast cars. There's also another race, and we call it the waste race. We're wasting significant dollars, not properly maintaining the vehicles that come to your door, and not properly retraining and retaining the people that deliver those packages. Package delivery is simple. People in trucks delivering packages. What could go wrong? Well, brace yourself. We're going to do a little bit more. But first, I'm going to introduce a key person for the community here, an economic development hero across our country. And he's going to sort of sensitize you to our ultimate mission, which is capturing that waste on the one side and using it to help develop our communities on the other side. With no further ado, we're going to cue up Roderick Miller.
My name is Rod Miller. I've been doing economic development for about 20 years. I've had the task and the fun, the privilege of being able to work in some of the most challenging economies around the United States, and work with these economies around how to recover their economies, how to help them grow. Some of the things that I've been able to do is work with as the lead of the New Orleans Business Alliance following Hurricane Katrina as the founding president. Then I worked in Detroit with the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation for several years, leading large-scale industrial development, commercial development, and other programs and small business programs in the city of Detroit. And then currently I am with the Invest Puerto Rico as the founding president, leading the recovery of Puerto Rico's market following Hurricanes Maria and Irma. One of the reasons why I'm really excited to be here today to talk about Final Mile is because I believe that Final Mile offers a solution that fits exactly where today's economy is. Well, what are you talking about, Rod? What we've seen is that over the last 30 years, everyone has been talking about the fourth economy, this idea that the economy is moving from this age of computers to more ubiquitous information, to this age of AI where information is ubiquitous, where things are tracked constantly in real time, and that there is never a lack of knowing where something is or how it's functioning. That's the world that we're moving to. A lot of the concerns that are emerging from that are, will people be able to have jobs? How is this going to impact the workforce? What does it mean now that, basic jobs, 80% of the jobs that are currently in the economy can be filled by computer technology just today? Well, the Final Mile is great because it merges the best of the old world with the opportunities of the new. So the Final Mile Corporation, by providing telematics, real-time solutions to help fleet services deliver the highest quality of product in the quickest time, the most efficient time, in the most effective manner. What it does is that it lowers the barriers to entry of making goods ubiquitous. As one that lives in Puerto Rico, one of the biggest challenges that I have is that when we order things, we never know when it's going to get there or if it's going to get there. And then when there are issues related to maintenance of vehicles and those sorts of things, they present tremendous challenges. Final Mile solves that on a global scale. Why does Final Mile solve that on a global scale? Because it really offers telematics and informatics so that in real times, whether drivers are conscious of the issues or not, the AI knows, and the AI can communicate and provide real solutions so that these vehicles can be serviced, and the Final Mile Corporation can not only make sure that those vehicles are serviced, but provide interim solutions and fleets so that there's as little downtime as possible. Part of what's happened as a result of COVID is people just don't want to interact anymore. They don't want to go into stores. They don't want to have these retail experiences. And part of it is because there's a health concern. And then the other side of it is a question of efficiency. Final Mile Corporation will allow, whether it's Amazon, whether it's the Postal Service, whether it's Walmart, it doesn't really matter the brand. It will allow organizations that need to deliver goods and services to people in real time to be able to do it effectively and efficiently. And it does it in a way that creates wealth, creates opportunities. Of course, we've got some of the biggest disparities that we've ever had between have and have-nots, along racial lines, along lines of whether people live in cities or whether people live in rural areas. And what's great about Final Mile is that it is a driver. It's a driver of a new economy through its integration. What are you talking about, Rod? Well, we're talking about the reality of needing of an infrastructure that's being built around smart cities. The smart city infrastructure is the type of infrastructure that knows more about us than we know about ourselves. And while that creates, a sense of comfort, it also creates a sense of question. And the question is, as this smart infrastructure, how do I, a simple guy from a rural part of, say, South Carolina, I actually am from a rural part of South Carolina, could participate in this new economy? Well, Final Mile creates opportunities for small businesses to get started up and down the supply chain, up and down the value chain of the logistics infrastructure. Final Mile also creates opportunities for people who have, limited education to actually upskill and not only be small business owners, but also work in a place where they've got security, because we know that this market is growing by leaps and bounds. Again, I'm excited to talk about the Final Mile Corporation, and I'm excited to be here.
Those are some pretty bold statements. We're talking about transformations here. We're talking about taking communities like Pontiac, where we are right now, and receiving benefits from the 1,200 people, I think, are being added right here to the Silver Dome, not too far from here. Our state fairgrounds is being transformed into something else across the country, and we'll talk about this a little bit further. We're seeing significant transformation of communities everywhere across America, just from Amazon alone, but then the Postal Service, other entities, FedEx, are also engaged in this process. But what is the common denominator? The cars, the vehicles. What's another common denominator? The independent operators who actually deliver to your door. By show of hands, does everyone here understand that the packages coming to your door from Amazon anyway are all delivered by independent parties that work with Amazon? Who knows that? Oh, okay, a significant number. That's probably why you're here. So those folks actually are incredible economic benefactors, potentially, to a community. Now, how do we capture this party that we're talking about here? We're going to talk about a couple. We're going to interview a couple, these owners. And how do we make those owners anchors, if you will, or leaders within their community? Well, we were involved with the operation of one of the original Amazon, what they call delivery service partners, DSP operations out of Atlanta. We were in 11 of these stations in 8 states. I was involved with having about 462 vehicles, just under 1,000 employees. And we were wrestling years ago with a number of the challenges that now thousands of others have wrestled with since we did. So we were somewhat pioneers, because we got these arrows in the back to prove it, of what it really takes to actually bring these packages to your door safely, efficiently, and profitably for us. And when we do it right, it's an awesome program that can transform communities. But when it's wrong, it's that waste we talked about earlier. So we've got sort of that waste race we've been fighting for years. Now, the interesting thing here is that we have a blend of technology, which is what my background is. I've been actually developing and building computers since the 70s, original hardware for a long time. But we're also talking about economic development. That's what we started off with Rod Miller. Well, where do those two come together? What we're going to talk about here today in the limited time that we have is how we've broken this out into business operations that work together. The Japanese kind of call it kiretsu, where a number of operations work kind of together to make one thing happen. And that's why they've been really effective in the auto industry, for example. So we're going to start talking about our nonstop truck service. Right outside the door, we have one of our tow trucks, and one of our trucks on there, we're going to show other simulations that we would have on the tow track. And right outside the door on the other side of the track is our track presence. Please come and visit us after. You see the two big nonstop trucks, and you see this big tent and a big video wall. Well, the wind blew like everything else out except that video wall. So it's like the one thing that was still standing out there after the weather. But it was there, and it was there for a purpose to help educate you all in terms of what we're doing. We're going to also talk about OnRamp. Now, that's a technical innovation. RAMP, Remote Automotive Maintenance Platform. What does that mean? Trucks that actually order and schedule their own service. We've heard about self-driving vehicles and all kinds of stuff that I read about in the 60s as science fiction. Yeah, but actually vehicles that schedule their own service have a significant economic impact, and a very relevant economic impact to the owners and to their communities. And when you don't do it that way, you certainly have that loss we were talking about earlier, those burning dollars. So fleet telematics is an important core technology that we are pioneering. Then we have telechain. We're going to speak briefly on this in this meeting, but certainly please feel free to ask us more about that. We have our own hardware, our own telematic devices, and our own platform that could work with the telematic devices that OEMs are baking into their vehicles going forward, like the electric vehicles. But more and more, every vehicle is connected in some way. So there's security risks and threats there, but there are also significant opportunities in package delivery when you actually take the packages and connect what's in the vehicle all the way through identity management to the actual door, ultimate destination where that package is going. So leveraging telematic technology in new ways for package delivery is a very specialized focus. Then as we capture and extract revenue from this process, we're giving it back. We're giving it back to local communities, drivers for driver safety, owners, and community colleges. So that's what we're going to touch on today. But first, we're going to show, here are our trucks, the ones you see out there. Our trucks do two things. One, bring service directly from dealers to the Amazon lots or the FedEx lots or the lots where the vehicles are parked, owned by the independent operators. And our trucks do something else. We have the tow trucks, which you've simulated out there. We also rent the vehicles so that when a truck breaks down, which they do daily, one of our trucks comes and takes the packages and delivers the packages, helps them finish the route, right? And so we're going to simulate that on our track out there. We've demonstrated it in a video. We'll show you that as well. But that's what we call nonstop. Amazon runs 7 days a week. They're only off 4 days a year. They're in multiple cycles. Those packages are coming out all the time. And so any disruption in that process is a stop, right? So you make money by not stopping. And if you do stop, there are penalties and expenses and waste.
The typical McDonald's owner actually takes home about $150,000 a year, according to Fox News. $150,000.
They queued him up. But this is, let me announce him here. This is Mr. Joe Brooks, who is an owner of an Amazon DSP operation in Lansing. But he was also the fleet executive for Chrysler, Daimler, Stellantis, until just a year ago, responsible worldwide for about 200,000 units of these vans sold worldwide. And he did the 18,000 unit deal with Amazon. So those vans you see were actually Mr. Brooks. So Mr. Brooks left Stellantis, FCA at the time, and then became an operator. So that's a unique skill set. He's uniquely qualified to make the statements that you're going to see him make. So now let's cue up Mr. Brooks. Well, while they're queuing up Mr. Brooks,
the typical McDonald's owner actually takes home about $150,000 a year, according to Fox News. $150,000 from a McDonald's owner. What do you think the losses could be? What's at risk in the course of a year for an Amazon DSP?
Honestly, the potential loss is the upwards of the actual cost of the vehicle, right? So if you were to not do oil changes, for instance, total the vehicle because of the engine, that's on you as the DSP owner because you didn't you didn't do preventive maintenance. For us, managing our fleet properly and doing all the preventative maintenance protocols that we do, we probably save ourselves upwards of 6 figures a year in potential costs that we're avoiding. Notwithstanding potential body damage, but that, any given day that can happen. But, based on our safety training, we try to reduce that as much as possible as well.
So it's safe to say that a significant number of those 3,000 DSPs that are growing are incurring those losses out there.
Absolutely.
Oh my. So that's a lot of just wasted money, because that's not benefiting anyone. It's just simply loss.
Yeah,
waste.
I personally know a few DSPs that, looking in the rear view mirror, had they known what they know now, they would have saved themselves tens of thousands of dollars in the last year.
Well, that's important, because if you start to quantify this, what we're saying is the typical DSP, and there are 3,000 of them in another year and a half, you'll have 5,000. And that's just Amazon, right? Taken into the Postal Service, FedEx, and others, can actually lose more than a McDonald's owner actually earns in a year. Think about that. Then they open up a new station, and you'll see anywhere from 10 to 12 to 18 of these owners. Well, that's a significant amount of money just being wasted by each owner. Imagine if you had 15 new McDonald's open up in a small community somewhere. What would that mean, right? What potential do you have there? Well, how do you avoid the loss? But then how do you accelerate the gain? So our nonstop service is a factory dealer service. We connect these vehicles to the manufacturer directly. We pick them up, we bring them back, we tow them, and we do the rentals. Mechanical, body, on-site pickup, porter service, and they're coordinated in such a way that it's seamless for the owner. It's nonstop. So the benefits of this start to inure to everyone around that owner. Now, the owners have two problems, and we're going to get into them briefly. One is the vehicles, which you just heard about, but the other is the personnel. The average tenure of an Amazon driver and others is about 5 months. 5 months. That means for each vehicle you see, there are 2.5 people driving that over the course of the year. That's waste. That's cost, because you're losing the knowledge and the skill set of those drivers. But why are they quitting, right? Why are they leaving? Isn't this such a good opportunity? It really is a good opportunity when done correctly. But Amazon, as great as they are, they're not the actual logistics business, really, not in terms of actually driving the vehicle. That's been left to owners like that. So at the end of the day, we have to help them prevent these problems, because an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure. So as we move forward in this presentation, we're going to get a little bit further into what we actually do. So here's a simulation of a vehicle broken down. Outside of our building, we bring one of our vehicles, which is right outside. We transfer the packages and bring them on their way, nonstop. When that doesn't happen, the owner is paying significant penalties for not delivering the packages. And I think everyone here has had packages not come, or not come in a timely way, right? Everybody's had that happen. And our last Christmas, we didn't get our Christmas till I think it was Valentine's Day. I got my Christmas gifts. It was real. And this isn't just, the Amazon delivery service providers. They're about up to half. UPS, the Postal Service, other entities deliver for Amazon as well. But then there's more than Amazon, and there's more than the Postal Service and FedEx. There's what we call third-party logistics carriers. Many of us are familiar with or have relatives working in this economy where they're delivering packages in what we call the gig economy. They're doing it on their own. They're using their own vehicles and things like that. It's highly inefficient, also highly wasteful, and also fairly unsafe, because these are not professional trained drivers. So as we move forward in this process,
I'm glad to be here and glad to be involved in what we're doing here in Detroit. Of course, I'm a Detroiter. I was raised in Detroit. I was born in California when my dad was at UCLA, and then the Ford family got him to come to Detroit and play for the Detroit Lions. And after his career there, he got into the automotive business and started having some dealerships there in Detroit. So I've been around cars all my life and working at the Ford store in Oak Park, Michigan, and being a part of the largest African American business in this country at one point. So I'm very, very tied into Detroit, very, very tied into the automobile manufacturing industry and dealer service industry. So I thought it was just a great partnership for me to get involved.
We want to talk about, just real briefly in the remaining time we have, what impact it has to what we call fixed operations, the actual dealership service department. What how much does that contribute to the overall bottom line profitability of the dealership? And what impact could it make for us to have the vans, in our case, brought into and out on time, already diagnosed, the parts, everything set up, so that the dealership doesn't have to spend more time actually getting a van back out and on its route?
Well, the service center of a dealership is the heartbeat. I've always said that. And, we've always looked at our service absorption rate. And we wanted to make sure that our service growth covered the fixed operations of the store. And if you're able to do that, you are setting yourself on a path to be profitable. So, and then not having to worry about the logistics and getting involved in fixing or repairing a vehicle or changing the tires, doing the brakes, having on-site service makes it so much better. And I think that it's just a real plan for success.
So it's important to understand, we described who the delivery service partner is, these independent third-party logistics carriers. Now we're talking about the dealers. That was Mike Farr, son of Mel Farr. Anybody here remember Mel Farr, the superstar? Yeah, they were the #1 African-American company in the country, 600 million back in 1995, 14 dealerships, and this young man was born into it, also a professional athlete, ended up with the Lions, and is another one of our board members. So with this deep understanding of the contribution of the service department, we call it fixed operations. In some cases, that's 80% of the profitability of a dealer. So we're talking about the DSPs over here. We're talking about the dealers as well. If you take a community, there's a dealer, right? There's multiple dealers. Well, how are those dealers actually connected in the process, right? Well, there are two parts that are really crucial to understand, and we're going to kind of move forward here into this. Number one, the organization of a dealer service department was not built around 600 vehicles on a parking lot that weren't there 6 weeks earlier, right? I mean, these things pop up rapidly. How many of you have actually seen these operations in your neighborhood? Anyone here seen how many? All of a sudden you saw these vans rolling down the street and like 8 months earlier, the building wasn't even there. Right. So there was no real infrastructure in place to really support all those vehicles. But what we do is we go, like I said, on site with our vehicles, working through dealers, Dodge, Mercedes. Of course, we also, obviously, most importantly, have been working with establishing relationships with Chrysler, because they're the #1 vehicle that's been sold, and Rams, which we have out here. But also we're setting up for these electric vehicles that are coming out as well. There's significant investments that we've made and that have been made in our dealerships to support every inch of these vehicles, because these are not cars. They have unique parts issues, constrained parts issues, skill set issues. So the care and feeding of these vans on scale is something that the dealerships weren't simply given time to prepare for, right? So it's, the Keiretsu effect we talked about. We're organizing what we call an indirect supply chain for that DSP. But instead of this big company, Amazon, it's really a whole lot of little folks that aren't automotive. Like I said, this gentleman that we showed you earlier was a fleet executive for Stellantis and struggling with it. Most of these other folks were restaurateurs or accountants or people that, had good credit, so now they're in Amazon doing this stuff. But the skill sets aren't there for fleet management. So that's why we have initiated OnRamp, Remote Automotive Maintenance Platform. That's a mouthful, but what it says is, let's just assume responsibility for the maintenance of those vehicles, cradle to grave, right from inception, right from you take the wrapper off a new one, or when we process a multi-point inspection for your used ones, we take it cradle to grave, and that's it. Your drivers, your managers, your owners don't have to do anything but let us take care of it. Now, why is that important? Because we can actually lower their overall cost of operation, right? We have mathematical models that, like a clock on the wall, that actually show how much money you're running if you're nonstop, and you're either nonstop or you're not, right? Because we're taking into account other factors affecting the profitability of the operation, right? That's what we talked about that stuff earlier. So you see what I'm talking about? What we're seeing is kind of building on things. Predictive analytics is an important field. Everyone here understands that. We actually have technology that, based on the use of the vehicles, not just factory data from a Milford test ground, but how they're actually used in routes, in local conditions around the country, weather conditions, time of day issues, we can predict two things. Pretty much when the vehicle needs service and also when the driver is going to mess up. And so the driver safety aspects are crucial. So the training of the drivers help that retention and cut those costs. But also we're able to dispatch the service in a more timely fashion with preventative maintenance on site. But also we have telematically controlled dispatch. In other words, when we see, and we can, what's really happening with that vehicle, we can automatically dispatch the porter to pick it up or the truck to go out and pick it up like you saw, or schedule on-site service to fix it where it is. Hands-off operation like automatic pilot. Now, if you think of a jet flying, the pilot's a highly trained person, but they're on automatic pilot most of the flight. The pilot's there in case something goes wrong, but actually telematics really fly that plane. Well, really, that's exactly how your service needs to be done on scale. And we are talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of these vehicles now coming into the marketplace and new technologies. You have to have something like this. So we do.
Look, from an operations standpoint, vehicles come in a couple of different ways, right? If it's coming from overseas, it's coming to a port, wherever that vehicle's grounded in auction or what so have you. So once those vehicles in, we're able to know about them. We're currently up in over 50 markets today. We have a very good, robust set of partnerships and relationships that allow us to be aware of that. From there, we work with them to understand who the title holder is going to be for that, right? Whether that's going to a DSP directly or to a dealership. And that's where the fundamental steps start to happen. We actually provide a 3D barcode that the DSP can then scan to immediately bring that vehicle up onto the platform. So they can take the first key critical step, which was mentioned earlier by Mr. Brooks, which is getting that multi-point inspection. And that's really the key for them, right? Knowing what's going on with that vehicle.
That's where it starts.
Exactly, right up front and right away. Without that, they're flying blind when they take possession of these vehicles, especially if they're not brand new. So that's key. From there, once that vehicle is up, we then look at a couple of different scenarios, which you alluded to, right? A lot of the OEMs are doing a great job today putting in and installing telematics right in those vehicles. And we work with those OEMs to ensure the consent process happens effectively and efficiently so we can get that DSP up and running based on that OEM telematics. The ideal state is we actually assemble and configure our telematics devices here, which we can install in those vehicles at that DSP's choice, which allows them to have everything we talked about a moment ago. Vehicle management, having the dispatch management, having the identity management, and then having the security features. But we also understand that some DSPs acquire vehicles that already have a telematics device in them, and they don't want to go through the standpoint of ripping and replacing. Well, our platform is device agnostic, and it allows them to stand those vehicles up on those platforms as well.
James Jones, our Chief Technical Officer. Now, it's important for us to understand as we kind of close this presentation out that we're doing a couple of things that are groundbreaking in terms of the hardware that he talked about, but also the method of distributing the money from the service that we also talked about. So look forward to us providing some announcements in the future about the way that we're going to allocate that revenue to drivers for driver safety, which we can monitor telematically, to the owners so we can help them develop and invest in their businesses and become more effective contributors to the local economy, and also community colleges, so that community colleges can address the number one problem these dealers have of training more technicians. So if you look at attrition in terms of drivers, we can help with that by helping people learn to be a driver, sign on for a year-long program so they can ultimately become owners, if not managers or team leaders in this method, and make more money and have a more stable career. Also, technicians, because that's the number one problem that the dealers have, especially when we transition to electric vehicles and vehicles requiring much more highly skilled technical. Today's mechanic isn't just turning wrenches, they're dealing with more electronic stuff. So at the end of the day, we're giving that money back to communities three ways. And we do believe that at the end of the day, the waste that you saw in the beginning, the burning money, will be mitigated. And the additional revenue that we can put into these communities will help each owner contribute value within their community. Finally, each driver, when they're getting this money, will be able to expend it with local businesses. So the idea is that in Highland Park, which is sort of right near the new State Fair facility, or plenty of parts of Pontiac that we all know that are right near the Silver Dome, we'll see in concentric circles positive economic impact And we hope to become a catalyst for other major corporate entities. We think this is an institutional development model that other entities can contribute to. I won't name them, but we're talking to them. And instead of just giving folks money, we are actually simply contributing to the economy that was already there.
Yeah, so when we first started looking at this, it really was wrapped around the Amazon opportunity. And that's where we got a good portion of the original data that got us excited. Said, look, there's $130 billion that's going to be spent over a 5-year window. There's $20 to $30 billion that's going to be spent on maintaining a fleet of vehicles, 250,000 jobs, 250,000 vehicles. And that's just Amazon. And that's just Amazon moving from covering half the households to trying to cover all of them. But if you think about it, the household stock of the United States is fixed. People live in every zip code, I think. But for the most part,
better.
If you think about the Postal Service as a template, by statute, they cover every door in the country.
1934 Universal Service Act.
Absolutely. And so what you're doing is you have that blueprint that's done by statute without necessarily commercial terms behind it, and you have commercial businesses replicating that. Amazon's halfway there. FedEx is some portion of the way there. DHL, UPS, they're all some portion of the way there. And now you have people like Walmart starting from scratch and growing it from 0, trying to get to 100. And so we're going to get to a place where we have 3 to 5 and growing different organizations putting these things on the road as ubiquitous as Postal Service trucks to cover all the households, to have a competing level of, a competing playing field to be able to handle those last mile logistics. And I think the innovation of that is going to be, getting stuff to your door and then taking stuff back. Whatever else can be done on site, leveraging that sort of built out infrastructure. And as the households grow, a new neighborhood with a cul-de-sac is built, that's going to get covered. And so there's natural ability to grow within to covering the infrastructure we have. And then as the infrastructure grows, there will be even more growth within that. And so that's $1 trillion opportunity.
I see them as the center of this conversation. The potential isn't the question. The reality is that most people struggle with how to get access to higher education. And what's great about community colleges and the technical system is that it meets people where they are. And what's great about the Final Mile Corporation's approach is that it meets people where they are. So someone with a high school diploma can get the education to not only just to be a driver, but not only could they be a driver, they can get the education to service the vehicles. Not only can they get the education to service the vehicles, they can get the entrepreneurship training so that they can actually own their own fleet. This is something that is not going away. The need for quality service delivery across the spectrum, whether someone's in Detroit, Michigan, or whether they are in Jacksonville, Florida, or whether they are in Dubuque, Iowa. The reality is that we have to cover the entire country. We've got to be able to provide quality service, and community colleges and technical schools are the ones that are best positioned to provide that coverage. And the Final Mile Corporation's model is a model that integrates across the entire value chain, and through these community college opportunities, we can get more young people working, get more young people opportunities to be entrepreneurs, and more opportunities to actually live out and represent the American dream.